I want to see that environment is very, very important because we all work and live in a certain environment, and we are part of that environment, and we create that environment, and we either benefit from that environment or we struggle in that environment. And I see, being in the healthcare profession for many, many years, I've seen many, unfortunately, uh, stressful environment for the employees, for nurses, for doctors. We have pressure overload. We're expected to perform and do well, and you know, uh, production pressure and volumes and numbers and times and cases. All these things are very, very common for us, and that can create a lot of stress upon doctors and nurses. And so, as I mentioned earlier in the uh, uh, SCARF model, that the job of leaders to create an environment of reward, create an environment where there's less threat for people, because then people will be themselves. They'll be able to contribute. They'll be able to do their best when you create it and foster that environment. Fortunately, we can't control that, but with time, things are changing. And as the leader, we have to make that transition from command and control. And so what are the things we need to learn about environment? As we were talking earlier, if you stay in comfort zone, if you are a person who does not like to initiate or try to take new tasks or challenge yourself, and you will establish and you'll see the result or ramification of that kind of behavior. You will have less control about your habits, or you will have trouble in establishing good habits, and you'll stuck with the bad habits more. And then you'll have trouble with attention, right? You will be less focused at work. You'll be so much distracted all the time. And you'll see that kind of environment creates a lot of negativity. People are more complaining and passive. And so I call this like a toxic leadership environment or toxic environment. Sometimes the leader is very toxic to their subordinates, to their colleagues, and to their people. And I see that disconnect is very common between a leader and their followers or subordinates or people who work for the leader. And the first thing a leader has to understand, and that, as I was talking earlier, the cognitive work, the rational and thinking brain, we are trained as a healthcare professional just to think rationally all the time. That you think intellect is everything, IQ is everything. We have to be smart and do more procedures and do more cases and do things quickly. And we show and we tell them, yes, we can do it, and we are smart, we're the best. So this is the criteria has been established, and everybody follow that. Unfortunately, this kind of model creates a very dissatisfying environment, and people may not understand you. And of course, the temperament does play a role. I totally understand that. And some people are very achievement oriented and hard on themselves and hard on other people. They expect the same thing from them. So if you don't work on this environment, if you on to control your environment, to work on yourself, on these things which I mentioned, and unfortunately, you will be left behind. And you see that pattern all the time. I've seen that in jobs, and I'm part of many jobs. I've seen very toxic environment, unfortunately, where leaders are not understanding. They're very authoritative. They don't pay attention. They don't care for you. You're just like a number for them, and they'll just say, okay, if you then, if you don't like. And that's what you see a lot of time. People who live in that automatic mode, they have less time with their patients, they have less self-care, they have less control about their schedule, they have less control about their lifestyle. They're so stressed out when they come at home, they take the stress out of their family, and then they get physically sick. And sometimes when the threshold for them to bear all that toxicity in the environment is high, then they end up leaving the job, and they go to the next place. And they, unfortunately, most of the time they find the same environments everywhere, because you have that kind of people everywhere who are like, not very productive and not very conducive to the environment and helpful and supportive for the new employee, for the new people. So what can we do to create an environment of thrive, to thrive, or thriving environment? And I mentioned here a few things now. Everybody pay attention. There's a model by Ken Blanchard many years ago in the 80s or 90s. He wrote a book about management he called 1 Minute Manager. And I'm sure most of you have heard the book. It's a very small, thin book. It's good and easy read. And he basically concluded the management in 1 minute. I think whenever an employee joins a group or joins a practice or joins, a floor, he or she starting at a clean slate. So that person, the leader, has a job. He can just mold and tell and make sure that person, however he or she wants them to work or behave or act, they can do that. And if they don't pay attention, they'll just go on the automatic mode and do whatever everybody's doing it. And then later on they complain about that employee. The employee is not doing well because the leader has done a poor job of training that person. So what are these three things he mentioned in 1 Minute Manager? He said when an employee starts, spend time in orientation and spend time with them, training them and tell them what is expected out of them. He calls it 1 minute goal setting. He said, talk to the employee, tell him these are the things which you have to do. These are the things is expected out of you, and then train them. Spend time in orientation. Don't rush them to get into the work mode very quickly, because then sometimes I see this, like people are so short of staffing, so short of work, and there's no training, there's no orientation, and then they don't even know what's expected out of them. Of course, they know the nature of their job, but there are a lot of other things about the environment they have to learn to perform their job well. So that's the thing they need to know and learn in orientation. So spend time in orientation with them, watch them for the first few days, be with them, is there to take care of them. So that's the first thing, 1 minute goal setting. And then while under their training, they'll do two things. Either they'll do well or they'll make mistakes. And don't punish your employee while you're training them. So just be patient with them. They're still learning. You can't punish a person who's training. So you basically train them. And then when they are making mistakes, then he calls it 1 minute reprimand. Actually, this is after the training, I'm sorry. Once they are trained and now they're expected to do the job, they'll do two things. They will either do well or they'll make mistakes. If they make mistakes, just do 1 minute reprimand. And at the same time, reprimand means what? You basically reprimand the behavior, not the person. Don't criticize the person. Just tell them that these are the things were expected out of them, and they're not doing what is expected out of them. Once they realize, they'll feel, okay, I need to work on these certain things, and they'll follow up with that. Same thing when they do well. And that's the part a lot of leaders miss. They just think, oh, they're doing the job, they're expected to do well, and they don't pay attention to it. That's the time you have to pay attention and do 1 minute praising. He said 1 minute praising is very, very important. And when you do that, 1 minute goal setting, 1 minute reprimand, and 1 minute praising, he said you can just do management in 1 minute. So now an employee or a new staff or a new doctor, he realized that my leader, my boss, is taking care of me. He's spending time on me to orient me. He wants me to do well. There's a connection between the leader and the employee. So now you basically setting at a good pace. So that person will do well. He's praised, always praise in public, in front of others, and praise the task. Not praise the person, praise how he's doing, be more specific what they do. So that tells you that you're paying attention to what they're doing. If you say, oh, you're doing great, well, that doesn't help, or great for what? Explain what they're doing good at, so and what they need to work on. So be more specific in terms of your reprimand and your praising. And then what you will find that with this attitude, you'll feel that the person will be more motivated to do things. He'll be more happy and inclined to do things. And he'll be more empowered to do things. And slowly you see that person is doing well in the department, doing well, because which is more conducive for that kind of environment. And then you basically, when you empower them, you do good onboarding, we call this the training. And then you slowly see that when you feel comfortable with their work, then give them autonomy, give them some tasks, and they can independently handle. Because nobody likes micromanagement, and that's not a good style. That's an old style of command and control. The leaders don't want to let go. They're afraid their subordinates will make mistakes. Of course, they're going to make mistakes. I mean, they will make mistakes, but a good leader will be able to digest their mistakes and will be able to handle, because they want them to learn from their mistakes. If they're not going to make mistakes, how are they going to move forward? It's impossible. Every failure, every person, we all designed to fail and come back and go back and forth. It's a normal part of life. So failing is not a failure as a person. Failing in a task or not learning the task is not the end of the world. We take it so personally because we are so attached and defined by our intellect and our ego and our task and skill, that we feel so, uh, we're so hard on ourselves when things don't work out the way we want them to work out. So, and then you starting to develop the relationship with the employee, you develop that empowerment, and basically you give them, he's finding that my boss is trusting me, and you have that trust factor, you have that autonomy factor going on, and now you have a good supporting environment. So now you're creating an environment which is thriving. Your employees are thriving, and you should have set guidelines and rules for people who are negative, who don't want to do work, who do, bad uh, backstabbing about other people who are doing well. So the manager has to keep track of those people and independently handle those people well. Also, feedback comes into play. Sometimes the feedback is very threatening for an employee, and our regular yearly feedback is not enough. And that's a threatening for the employee. That creates a threat state. People will say, okay, my boss is calling me to the office, I must have done something wrong, right? That's what people think all the time, that I'm doing something wrong, that's why they're addressing me. But sometimes you have to give them feedback while they're doing well. So that's praising, and you'll encourage that environment more. You'll encourage that behavior more. And the feedback has to be more, not very formal, have to be casual, talk to them how they're doing well, and then see what are the things they can do, tell about yourself, that how they have, because you're not perfect leader, you've made your own share of mistakes. Share these things with them. They'll feel, okay, I'm not alone if I'm not doing well. Share how they can move forward, how they can do better. Stay more clear with them, have more clarity, especially in the environment of pandemic. If you have staffing issue, if you have things which you need to let people go for a short time, let them know that you have their back. They'll come back when things are stable. Give them a little bit of a certainty. Otherwise, if you ignore them, what will happen? They'll move forward, they'll start looking at jobs, and then you'll be short-staffed again. And you don't want to repeat this cycle all the time. And the last thing I want to see in this, the thriving environment, is the environment of positivity. Positivity is not just being nice or being optimism. Actually, I mean, it's a big subject about optimism and being positive. There was, he was this president of American Psychological Association. I'm forgetting his name. He wrote a book, Optimal, Authentic Happiness, and on optimism. And also there's a psychologist, I read her book on positivity. Her name is Barbara Fredrickson. So a lot of research is done on positivity, and it was amazing. And you see, positive. She's created a scale of positive to negative scale. Right, it has to be from 3 to 1. Normally, we have that negativity to positive is 5 to 1. We're 5 times negative, then 1 time positive. The default of the brain is negative, because the brain pay attention to what's wrong and what's not good. So the leader has to come up with ideas of positivity and create an environment of positivity. What she calls it is called positivity will bring a broad and build state. People have more broad vision when they are positive. They're more optimistic, and they are more, their vision is, they see on the side more often. when people are negative, the vision is tunnel. They just look at the thing which very myopically. So leader has to create that environment of positivity and give them praise and positivity in a specific manner. So we also have to be careful sometimes when we excessively praise people. Sometimes people who may think of themselves good to begin with, when you praise them, then they think they're invincible and you cannot teach them. And so you have to be very diplomatic and make sure you handle these people very carefully